I bought this house off of a friend. He was moving into a retirement home at my request, and he didn't have anyone else to leave anything to. So I offered to take his little backwoods haven off of his hands so that he could go into town to live amongst the civilized folks and finally get the help that he desperately needed. He didn't like that idea one bit, saying that it would be better just to bulldoze it and sell the land, though he seemed to be of two minds on the whole things, bouncing back and forth, only coming to a decision when it was time to shake on it. He was an old-timer, with a back as brittle as glass and eyes that could almost see you if he squinted, and a mind that may remember your name if it was written on your forehead. But despite our brief relationship before his unfortunate passing, I would count this man to be amongst my greatest friends, as well as the source of my ongoing dread. To start at the beginning, I had just come to this town looking for a piece of the wild United States that I had heard still existed somewhere out there. I first settled down with a job at the logging company here outside of a town I'll be scanning location, as I do not wish to be disturbed. It was hard work, and I was no stranger to it, and the trees were a welcome change of pace after spending so much time in the concrete jungle. That's where I met John. John's job was to sit at a desk and keep track of how many trucks came in and came out every day, often sitting at his desk in silence and completely alone, which he enjoyed very much. He was quite irritable at the start, and he stayed that way with most everyone else at the mill. But we formed a quick friendship trading stories about not being big fans of large amounts of people and dense cities. Him and I, both being from urban rats, seemed to give him some welcome mental clarity as well as calming his grumpy demeanor when I came around. We often joked about how funny it was that rough memories can be made rosy by nostalgia. Our lives intertwined for about 7 months before he collapsed on the job. Heart attack. He survived, but everyone at the mill who knew him agreed it was just too close a call. He got let go with severance. It was finally time for him to retire. The problem was, his work being far from town was one thing, but he also lived out there, and in the aftermath of his heart attack, he couldn't live an hour and a half from the nearest emergency room. He was sad to have to say goodbye to his paradise amongst the pines. Having lived in that house for 30 years, alone and happy, he built it himself, a dream he had since he was young. He held himself well when it came time to wake up to the unfortunate reality of time, making sure not to cry around any of us. I helped him move into the home, but he was only there for 3 weeks before the next attack. The emergency room was only across the street now, but it still seemed too far away. A couple of the guys from the mill attended his funeral. They didn't much like him, but it was just the right thing to do, so they held their tongues until it came time to go home. I went home as well. It just so happened that my home was the one belonging to the man in the box. The home itself was a one-story square, with a front door that led to a living room, with an adjacent kitchen that was technically the same room, with 2 doors on the back wall, one lead to a cramped bathroom, the other to an equally cramped bedroom. It was tight, but still impressive for the handiwork of one man. It was 1 story, but had a hatch in the middle of the kitchen that led to a small basement area that John had used as a pantry. The walls were lined with pickled vegetables and cans of brown meat, which was standard for anyone who lived this far up in the mountains, as you're liable to be on your own for a while when the snow fell in the winter. The whole basement was covered in a thick layer of dust. Obviously, John didn't come down here often on account of needing to climb down what remained of what was once a ladder in order to reach it, which for a man of his age would be a major feat every time. On the opposite wall from where the ladder extended down into the sunken space was a window. A small egress window that brought in some natural light from the outside. Or rather, it would, were it not painted over in what can be assumed to be 3 dozen layers of green paint. Clearly John didn't like what he saw when he looked out this window. I can't blame him. In the weeks that followed John's funeral, I followed a simple routine. Going to work in the morning, coming back when the workday was down, and cleaning out the messes that John either didn't notice were as bad as they were or more likely didn't have the physical strength left in him to feasibly clean. I cleaned black mold out of the shower. I placed a few broken pipes in as well, and sanded down the chipped paint around the doorways. It was that last task that got me thinking about the window downstairs. I was at the hardware store getting paint and painting supplies to redo some of the walls when I also picked up some paint stripper, acetone, and vinegar, as well as a host of other chemicals just in case my first few options didn't work out. Whenever I found a material to remove paint, my mind always worried that it wouldn't work, and I felt a building pressure in my chest that only relented when I got something else. I could always just go back to town to get something else. But whenever I left the property, This nagging feeling in the back of my mind kept bringing me back to thinking about clearing the paints. I was going to clean that window and see what John was covering it for. If it was something as simple as a crack in the glass, and I could replace it. There was no other source of light down there, and I did not like using the flashlight while I was dusting, which wasn't as difficult as I remember it being when I look back on it. But it was always the excuse I used to never leave it off of my to-do list. I always had to ask myself, did I actually want to clear the paint? I had to have wanted to do it. It was all I could think about doing, and it came up in my mind more and more the longer I stayed there. Maybe my to-do list was gradually growing shorter and it was just the last thing for me to do. Or maybe it was the most important thing that I could do. I just didn't know it yet. It was before dawn when I woke up. I wanted to get an early start because if I could fend off the laziness, I could finally be done. But that isn't how it started. I woke up panting and disoriented, completely forgetting where I was. I could see the red blinking letters of my alarm clock across the room and walked over to it like nothing was wrong. But my heart was pounding in my chest. I saw things moving in the darkness, and the small room that I knew I was in looked larger. Like the walls weren't even there and I had woken up in some pitch black space with only my alarm clock and my bed. And when I turned back, it seemed as though my bed wasn't there anymore. I flicked the light switch and the walls returned. They had never left. Nothing did. I've always just been here in my room. The pounding stopped when the lights turned on and I was normal again. I had to shake it off and get to work. Work would make me forget. That's what my head told me over and over again. The only issue being, I wasn't sure it was my head saying these things. I wanted to finish painting the kitchen. But before I could even think about what I was going to do first, I was already descending the stairs. I must have blanked, because I didn't remember even entering the kitchen. It was pitch black again, but I didn't feel like I had in my bedroom. This was the normal kind of darkness, a kind that I was here to solve by clearing the paint. I already had my supplies set up down here from last night. I don't remember bringing them in from the shed, but they were down here, so I must have brought them. No one else lives here. Wasting no more time, I prepared a roller with the paint stripper and let it do its thing. Almost immediately, the layers of paint seemed to melt away, almost unnaturally so. In fact, the dark green grew lighter, though sunrise wouldn't be for another hour. So I had time before any sunlight could naturally enter this room anyways. While I was waiting, I decided to dust the shelves and inspect the walls for any mold that I missed or gaps in the bricks that formed the foundation. I had never noticed the bricks before, never really concerning myself with anything other than the rows upon rows of pickled herring, but there was something written on them behind the shelves. I shined my flashlight at the wall in order to see what had been painted directed onto the bricks and what looked to be the same shade of green that had coated the window. It was scribbles. Then my eyes focused, as if I were exiting a haze. They looked different. They were letters, words, a phrase, a warning. Fear the light. You do not belong. I blinked, and they were scribbles again. Chicken scratch that looked like a simple paint spill. As time went on, and more light seeped in through the crumbling paint, I saw more droplets and spills on the floor. John must have been in a rush to paint over the window, making a large mess that he never bothered to clean up. One more task for me once the daylight comes, it seemed. And when I looked up, the daylight had come. It was a bright, beautiful summer sun up in the sky, and for the first time since I bought this house, I could see it through the sunken egress, feeling the sweet satisfaction of a job well done. I wanted to jump right into my next task, which would involve finally cleaning the basement, which was far filthier than I could have ever imagined it being when I had my flashlight as my only source of light. I was shocked, however, to not find a single bug in the basement. It should have been crawling with them, but I didn't even find a single cockroach or worm coming in through the cracks liège bricks. Clearly this room was the only one in the house that the bugs didn't like, as I had been dealing with infestations since I first moved in. I scrubbed the floors with a mop and used some of the leftover paint stripper to clear out the floor and the scribbles on the wall. It was hard work, as the paint was much harder to remove when it wasn't on the window. It seemed to take me all morning, and I didn't detect a wink of change outside the window. In fact, it seemed to be about noon out there since I first cleared it. I kept wanting to say that I had made enough progress and to call it for an early day, as it seemed that once I had cleared the window, my drive to do much else had been expended. It was all I could think about for days. But now it was done. The work was far from over, and I had accomplished that I had wanted to do, ascending the ladder. I re-entered my living room for some nice relaxation on the couch. But on my way, I discovered something quite peculiar. The window in the kitchen was dark outside. About the late evening. I checked my watch. It was 7:10. This window looked like 7:10 p.m. But the sun outside of the downstairs window was most assuredly noon. I had to have been seeing things. But I had seen enough strange things today, and I was not prepared to let this pass me by without doing anything like I had in times before. I quickly turned around and descended the ladder. But when my foot touched the ground, the pressure in my chest continued. I recognized it now. It was fear. I turned my head and saw a bright, sunny summer day outside of the egress window. No later than noon sharp. I was sure of it. It must have been some trick. Some illusion. Outside is not day or night, depending on the floor that you're looking out of. Was it an elaborate screen? Sean didn't even know how to leave a voicemail. There's no way he could create such a game just to laugh at me from beyond the grave. I turned the rusted and aged window lock and pushed it open. Almost instantly, the pleasant sounds and smells of the forest entered the basement. The concept was worrying enough, but the calm nature of the nature around me put me at ease. I could hear the bubbling water from the creek that ran alongside the house, the wind moving gently through the branches of the tall pine trees. I could smell the pine needles. I could taste the pollen in the air. It was so utterly normal, better than normal. It was perfect. Perfect echoed in my mind for a good minute. Once I came up with that word to describe one thing, it rapidly took the place of every other word I had used to describe anything about what I was seeing out of the egress window, stamping over everything else until everything I saw and remembered seeing was perfect. I checked my watch again. It was 7:15 p.m. now. It was still the evening and definitely not what I was seeing with my own eyes. Feeling as though I was in desperate need of sleep, I closed the window and went back up the ladder, right to my bed. Sleep would definitely fix this. Sleep did not fix this, as every day I would wake up, check the basement, go to work, come home, check the basement, and go to sleep again. Morning, afternoon, evening, dusk, dawn, twilight. Every time I checked the downstairs window for the next 3 weeks, I saw the same day, always at noon, always sunny, even when it was rainy, foggy or cloudy out here on the main floor. I ran an experiment one day. I opened the window from the inside and walked around the outside of the house to find the other end. To my surprise, the window was shut. Thinking that maybe it closed on its own, I returned to the basement and found that the window was still open from this side, which made me theorize that this window wasn't even part of the house at all. One day, I got fed up with the strangeness of the window, so I stood in front of the open window and climbed through it. It didn't look or feel like it did from the view of looking through the egress. It felt warmer, more comforting, like it wasn't actually a summer day. It was a memory of a summer day. The best summer day you ever had. It felt familiar, like it was simultaneously the Platonic ideal concept of a summer day, as well as being a summer day that had already happened. I tried to think hard, to find something, anything that would pin it down. Why this felt so familiar? Why it was this day and no other? Was it even about me? I had to take a step back to recalibrate. My mind was filling with questions that didn't make a lick of sense. Why was I so quick to buy into this being a specific day in summer? It was just any old day in summer. Because of course it was. It was today, and today is not changing window or not. Though even at the conclusion of that thought, I questioned my own statements. I wanted to stay here, to understand it, to enjoy it, to know what it was all about. It was pleasant here. It was perfect. I wanted to sit down by the creek bed for hours, or days, or forever. This warm feeling didn't dissipate in the slightest, and I didn't feel at all tired. I was content. I was happy. I felt like I was where I wanted to be. That piece of wild America I set out for was here, right where I was, right on the other side of that window. This unchanging eternal summer, rosy like a memory, unending like life, all painted with the warm hue of golden sunlight from above. I checked my watch, and my spine ran cold. I couldn't even read the numbers. It all just looked like squiggles, just like the writing on the wall. I remembered the writing on the wall. I remembered a lot about the other side of the window. The more I remembered, the colder I felt, and the hazier my watch got, until it snapped into focus and read 11:46 p.m. All sounds and smells stopped when I read the numbers, as if I had done something wrong, something to disturb a world where I was alone. I wasn't supposed to look at my watch, because somehow, it made it clear that I didn't belong. I looked up and across the creek was a black figure, like a shadow without a man casting it, staring at me with two unblinking white eyes. I couldn't shake the feeling that he looked familiar. Youdong. My head was flooded with ideas, theories, all manner of answers to questions that were too numerous to ever hope to answer. But I knew in that moment that I had done wrong. I'm not supposed to know the time, but I brought a watch. I thought back to when I woke up in my bedroom and walked to the alarm clock. He was there, behind me. Youdong. He didn't move at me, cross the river, or do anything that was directly threatening. He just stared, and I had to stop staring at him, because the more I stared, the more I noticed him, the less I noticed behind him or in any way around me. It looked at first like a fog and rolled in, covering the land behind him, but that wasn't true at all. There was no fog. The tree line and the mountains beyond that were once visible in the far-off distance were simply gone, consumed by an encroaching tide of white that tore and shredded them to nothingness. I turned my head. It was happening all around me, encircling the house, closing in. Youdong. I looked back. The figure was still across the creek. His hand was raised now, pointed behind me, back at the window. He didn't have a mouth, and I could hear him screaming in my mind, "Are you in?" The white light sped up, almost as if it saw me and hastened its approach. The figure did not heed its own advice, and when the light touched it, it disappeared as well. I scrambled to my feet and sprinted for the window, the white light closing in around me until I'd have head first into the window, my field of vision being completely drowned out in the light. I woke up on the basement floor. The window was shut, with an impact crack in the center, like a large rock was thrown at the window from the outside. Whether that outside was the real outside is up for debate. I opened the window again and saw it to be bright outside. Not like before. It was still summer, still sunny, still noon, which was still wrong as it was now past midnight. It looked nearly identical to that ideal summer day I had seen and experienced before, but it looked different. Something tiny, something you can't see until you're looking back. And now that I'm looking back, I can finally say that I know what had changed. One single fraction of a second, one moment to the next, one moment at a time, only passing or fading away into the fog when you notice that once the clock's hand twitches, it ends. I felt the pressure again, the draw to return to that place, but I knew that I could not stay. It mounted and mounted until I finally painted over the window, and once again, no natural light entered the basement. I painted layer after layer until the pressure in my chest faded, and I no longer wanted to open the window and return to that perfect place. I tried for many months to make heads or tails of what I had seen. It is my belief that I had stepped inside of a memory, that rosy world you think about when you don't want to think about the life you're living now. Based on the original paint on the window, I can tell that John had experienced this event as well, doubtlessly drawn in by the same feeling that I had experienced, and I now know why he wanted the house to be bulldozed, as well as the reason for his indecisiveness. He spent 40 years in this house, with the draw of that window seeping into his dreams at night. Maybe that's why he was so irritable to everyone, because every day he had to leave that perfect world and go to work in his broken body. Maybe he liked me because I reminded him of who he was when he came here. I think I know what I have to do. For him, I'm going to bulldoze the house. Close the window for good. I'll take John's advice, because no one belongs there. No one except for that shadowy figure I saw across the creek bed. But I still see him every day, no matter what side of the window I'm on. He was my shadow, always walking behind me, staying behind in my memories while I move forward into the many moments ahead, which I will most assuredly never notice when they pass away.